Hey, Adam, let me talk to you tomorrow. I'm in the middle of a recording. No problem. Bye.
I want to welcome you to Decade of Destiny, which is a program, and I've told you this every week, that I, as your pastor, am committed to helping you succeed in every key area of your life in the next 10 years. And that means succeeding physically in your health, spiritually, emotionally, financially, relationally. I want you to succeed in your career. I want you to succeed in your family. And as your pastor, I'm going to do everything I can to help you out in this because God wants you to go through this next decade with direction, not just drifting. I want to welcome you to Decade of Destiny.
I am not an anti-gay or anti-gay marriage activist. Never have been, never will be. During the whole Proposition 8 thing, I never once went to a meeting, never once issued a statement, never once even gave an endorsement in the 2 years Prop 8 was going. So I urge you to support Proposition 8 and pass that word on. I'm going to be sending out a note to pastors on what I believe about this, but everybody knows what I believe about it, and they heard me at the Civil Forum when I asked both Obama and McCain on their views.
If you're wired to be an anthropologist, you be an anthropologist. If you're wired to be an underseas explorer, you be an underseas explorer. If you're wired to make deals, you make deals. If you're wired to paint, you paint. Did you know that God smiles when you be you? When my kids are little, they're all grown now, I have grandkids. I used to go in and sit on the side of their bed, and I used to watch my kids sleep. And I just watched their little bodies rise and lower. Rise and lower. I would look at them and go, this is not an accident. Rise and lower. And I got joy out of just watching them sleep. Some people have the misguided idea that God only gets excited when you're doing, quote, spiritual things like going to church or helping the poor or, confessing or doing something like that. The bottom line is God gets pleasure watching you be you. Why? He made you. And when you do what you were made to do, he goes, that's my boy. That's my girl. You're using the talent and the ability that I gave you. So my advice to you is look at what's in your hand, your identity, your influence, your income, and say, it's not about me. It's about making the world a better place. Thank you.
Am I living my purpose, Rick? Well, when you be who God made you to be, that makes God smile. I used to think that God only smiles when we're doing like spiritual stuff, confessing, going to church, reading the Bible, things like that. But actually, God gets enjoyment out of watching you be you. When my kids were little, I used to watch them sleep at night. And their little chests would rise and lower and rise and lower. And I got so much pleasure out of that because I made them. I'm their daddy. And when you be who God made you to be, a doofus. But when you be you, God looks down and goes, that's my boy.
Well, let me ask you something.
This myth that people are going to see each other in hell, that they're going to party in hell, that's just, it is unloving to not tell the people the truth when you know it's there. In the next 365 days, 74 million people in the world will go into eternity without Christ and without hope. I can't live with that. I can't. My love compels us.
One of the things that the Bible teaches is that this life's not all there is. You're going to spend more time on that side of eternity than on this side. You get 60, 80, maybe 100 years on this side. You're going to get trillions of years on that side. And this side is preparation for the next.
got a very friendly God. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
The God you describe
Yeah.
is very friendly, very casual. Probably doesn't wear a tie either. But your God's a lot like Jimmy Buffett. He's very, very. He's
Laid
low
back.
key.
He's low key.
Paradise is Margaritaville. Why do you think people respond? Is it because the God you describe is not vengeful?
My guest tonight is the author of The Purpose-Driven Life, one of the best-selling books of all time. And get this, for some stupid reason, his purpose isn't even to make money. Please welcome Rick Warren. Thank you very much. You beautiful people. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Reverend Pastor
Yeah, just Rick.
Rick. All right.
That's it.
Let's get casual with
You
each
get
other.
cash.
Just me and Rick. Now, before we go any further, I just want to make clear, the purpose of life does derive. You're basing this on biblical truths, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's explain to the kids out there that God does exist and God does love you, because their image of God from the MTVs and the Nintendos is like some vengeful monkey who's throwing barrels at Super Mario. They don't know. They don't know who God is. Who's God, Rick?
Well, God is creator, and he created the entire universe just so he could create this galaxy, so he could create this planet, just so it tilted at the right axis so it wouldn't burn up or freeze up, to sustain human life, because he wanted to create human beings. He wanted to create you to love you. He loves even Stephen Colbert.
Oh, I believe that.
Yeah.
Because he created me in his image, and
Yeah.
I sure love me. Now, but that galaxy Earth thing, that sounds like the gospel according to Carl Sagan. I mean, are you a fundamentalist preacher?
No.
You're not.
No, fundamentalist is somebody who stops listening.
Uh-huh.
There are fundamentalist Christians, there are fundamentalist Jews, there are fundamentalist Muslims, fundamentalist atheists, fundamentalist secularists. It's an attitude that doesn't listen to anybody else.
Well, I don't want to hear any of that. What I want to hear is that you say every word of the Bible is inerrant, though. Every word is
that.
It's inerrant.
I do believe that.
So we should stone gay people. Says so in Leviticus. We should do that.
Who are your writers?
Who are my writers? I've got none tonight except the inerrant word of God.
Oh, there you go. My writers.
I mean, you've got a very friendly God. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
The God you describe is very friendly, very casual. Probably doesn't wear a tie either. But your God's a lot like Jimmy Buffett. He's very, very. He's
Laid
low
back.
key.
He's low key.
Paradise is Margaritaville. Why do you think people respond? Is it because the God you describe is not vengeful?
No, there's nothing in that book that historic Christianity hadn't said over 2,000 years. I just said it in a very simple way. It took me actually 7 months, about 12 hours a day to write the book, and I spent half the day just trying to make the sentences shorter. So if it's 17 cents a word, I'd say, how can you say it in 9? If there were 9 words, I'd say, how can I say it in 5? Einstein once said, if you can't say something in a simple way, you don't really understand it.
Well, that's see, funny. I wrote my book over the Columbus Day weekend by screaming it into a tape recorder.
Wow.
I just had somebody transcribe it. The sub-question of this book is, what on earth am I here for? What do you think the purpose of life is? Is that individual, or do you believe in something like the Baltimore Catechism, where we're here to know God, to love God, to serve God?
Well, I do believe that. One of the things that the Bible teaches is that this life's not all there is. You're going to spend more time on that side of eternity than on this side. You get 60, 80, maybe 100 years on this side. You're going to get trillions of years on that side. And this side is preparation for the next. And there are things that we're going to do in heaven that God says, I want you to practice here so you're not a doofus when you get there.
Do you know which ones you're supposed to practice?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
there are a lot of options
Yeah.
out there of things you could be doing with your life. Like, what is the purpose of every day? Can we?
Well,
can I say what my purpose is?
No,
Like,
you
my
already-
purpose is to shout at people who I disagree with. Am I living my purpose, Rick?
Well, you know, when you be who God made you to be, that makes God smile. I used to think that God only smiles when we're doing like spiritual stuff, confessing, going to church, reading the Bible, things like that. But actually, God gets enjoyment out of watching you be you. when my kids were little, I used to watch them sleep at night. And their little chests would rise and lower and rise and lower. And I got so much pleasure out of that because I made them. I'm their daddy. And when you be who God made you to be, a doofus. But when you be you, God looks down and goes, that's my boy.
Well, let me ask you something. If you ask Jesus to come into your life, will he?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you ask Jesus to come on your show, will he do that too? Because I'm having trouble booking guests right now.
I have connections.
You do?
I do.
Please.
But I notice here that you have the eagle in the stained glass.
Oh, yeah.
Do you believe in separation of church and state?
Absolutely not. Rick Warren, thank you so much for joining us. The book, in case you haven't heard of it, is The Purpose-Driven Life. Please buy one.
The biggest mistake that churches make is we think that sermons will produce spiritual maturity. They will not. Bill Hybels is one of the greatest preachers in history. They forget 95% of what they hear within 72 hours. Well, if you're forgetting 95% of everything you've heard in your lifetime, that is not going to produce spiritual maturity. We can't give pat answers anymore. People say, well, if you just pray and love people and preach the word, your church will grow. That's just not true. Somebody needs to stand up. I know a lot of guys who pray more than I do and their church is dying. It takes more than prayer to grow a church. Ecclesiastes 10:10 says, if the axe is dull and its edge is unsharpened, more strength is needed, but skill will give success. Skill. It doesn't say dedication will give success. It doesn't say sincerity will give success. It doesn't say preaching the word and loving people will give success. It says skill.
where the world is ever more swiftly opening up, and the cliché about a global community becomes an economic, political, often social reality. In this new world, how religious faith develops will have a profound impact. The forces shaping this world at this moment are so strong, and they all tend in one direction.
I want you to give a warm Saddleback welcome to a great Christian, a great leader, world leader, and my dear, dear friend. Would you give a warm welcome to Tony Blair, Prime Minister Tony Blair.
Now, in this service, we have as our special guest Dr. Peter Kreeft to speak on the shocking life of Jesus. Now, these 5 scholars that I've brought in on Jesus from around the world have written together over, at least 150 books. They're going to be out on the patio. Philip Yancey will be after this service signing books. Dr. Kreeft will be after the second service signing books. And let me tell you about him. He is a professor of philosophy at Boston College and also at King's College. He has written personally over 60 books. He is an amazing scholar. His newest book is Jesus Shock, and when I read it, I said, I've got to have Peter Kreeft come and speak to Saddleback. He has written many books, Handbook on Apologetics and other things like that. I want you to give a warm, rousing Saddleback welcome to one of the great Bible scholars of our day, Dr. Peter Kreeft. Would you give him a warm welcome?
hostility, terrorism, refugee camps, all of the things that cause hostility between generations, hostility between races, hostility between nations, hostility between ethnic groups and economic groups. And it's just an evidence of our unwillingness to reconcile with God and to reconcile with each other.
And later you should talk to Tony Blair, who's just formed a foundation. He's much too humble to talk about it on this very issue. To my brother, Islamic brother here from Italy, I would say, I'm not really interested in interfaith dialogue. I'm interested in interfaith projects.
It's not about me. It's about making the world a better place.
In Matthew 10 and Luke 10, where Jesus sends his first followers out, and he says this. There's a whole list of things to do, which I don't have time to go into. But one of them, he says, when you go into a village, you find the man of peace. Find the man of peace. There's a man of peace in every village, in every government, in every business, in every church. I've found them all around the world. And so I said, what is the man of peace? He said, when you find the man of peace, if he's open and he's willing to work with you, you bless him and you start your work there. If the guy's not open to working with you, you dust the dust off your shoes and go to the next village, because you can always find somebody to work with. Here's the other thing. The man of peace does not have to be a Christian believer. Could be Muslim, could be Jewish, because Jesus said, when Jesus said find a man of peace, there were no Christians yet. Right. Jesus hadn't died on the cross, there was no resurrection. He just ain't going out and find somebody to work with.
You better tell them where we are.
Okay, sure.
Today's talk.
Okay, today's talk. You know where we are? We are in Lausanne, Lausanne Conference at Cape Town. And what's going on here is something that I've been struggling with. Just the last couple of days, I've been, the first day I was all charged up about evangelism. The second day, I was all charged up about social action. And I was trying to fit these things together, and you did for us today. Tell us, what did you say about how to fit these two things together?
Well, I feel the burden of the tension that exists there in this room as we gather 4,000 of us, with some loving to emphasize the fact that the gospel is designed to deliver people from everlasting suffering, escape from hell into heaven. And I think that's absolutely true, because we're all children of wrath. We're under the just and holy condemnation of God. And then there are others who love the thought that when they're empowered by the gospel, they minimize, or they seek to alleviate the sufferings of the world here and now. And what I said was, I plead with you, don't choose between those two. Because when the gospel takes root in a human soul, it does both. It makes us care about all suffering. It makes us want to alleviate all unjust human suffering, all of it, here and now. And then I added, but because of the scope of eternity and the seriousness of the fires of hell, the eternal suffering is infinitely more serious. So I gave him this sentence, and I said, could we say this? Could we say Christians, in the name of Christ, care about all suffering, especially eternal suffering? And then I said, if you find resistance welling up in your heart to eternal suffering, or especially caring about that, or you find resistance welling up in your heart to all suffering being opposed now, then either you have a defective view of hell, or you have a defective heart. And if your heart is good towards human beings, and if your view of the Bible and the horrors of hell is good, then you'll be able to say, we Christians care about all suffering, especially eternal suffering. And I've found that sentence in my local church really helps people not become either or.
That's really... And you are so deliberate about saying the end goal is quality of life for people, and I'm willing to work with anybody to get there.
What's missing from this document is a clear statement about what Christianity really is, and how we could come together to talk with Muslims from our unique, distinctive, biblical standpoint. It won't work to simply say, you have a prophet and we have a prophet, which is really the way this document sounds. We have a prophet who said, love your enemies. You have a prophet who said, love your enemies.
What can the church do? And your response was to actually expand that and say it's actually about houses of worship. And I'm really struck by how explicit you were as an evangelical pastor about the need for Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims and Christians to all be a part of efforts that are solving poverty.
So I just want to say that when we speak of the love of God, and even quote a verse from 1 John 4, and don't take into account the very next verse, where the love of God that sustains us Christians is the love of God that sent the Son, Jesus Christ, into the world to be the propitiation for our sins. That's the next verse, but not the one that's quoted into the document. We are not being, it seems to me, we're just not being honest. We're not saying to the world who's reading this document that the love of God that we get strength from is the love of God uniquely expressed through Jesus Christ as the propitiation for our sins, because he died on the cross and rose again. All of those things Islam radically rejects. So they do not believe in the God we believe in. They do not believe in the love of God that we believe in. They don't believe in the Son of God that we believe in. They don't believe in the propitiation that he made for us. And to then talk in vague terms as though the love of God is a common standing place is to deceive.
Those houses of worship have the most credibility. People trust that imam. They trust that pastor. They trust that priest, that minister, whoever it is, because he is there caring for the people in their times of needs.
We don't stand together on a common love of God or a common understanding of God. They don't worship the true God.
And what I love, what I can find in common with Muslims is they talk about God. There's some people who, when you get around them, if you say the word God, they're afraid and they clam up. But you can't talk with a Muslim without talking about God, because it's a part of their life.
Their classmates from college 30 years ago. And they're starting to wonder if they're talking about the same person. She did this and she did that. Oh, I don't think she did that. And she looked like this. Oh, I don't think she looked like that. Oh, yes, she did. And they're arguing. They think they're talking about the same person. And somebody comes up and says, oh, why don't you just open the yearbook? So they get out the yearbook from 1968, and they open it up, and they say, there she is. And the other guy says, oh, no, that's not who I was talking about. And it's all clear now. We're not talking about the same person. And my friend said to me, Jesus Christ, as he is revealed in the New Testament, is the yearbook. You open the yearbook, and you look at his picture, and you say, is that your God? And the Muslims are going to say, no, that's not our God. And then you say, well, we're not talking about the same God then.
You know, I'd love for you to talk about whether it was an expansion for you to go from the idea of churches being the only kind of distribution system to this, to again being so direct about the need for different faith communities. One of the stereotypes of people of faith, right, and perhaps evangelicals in particular, is that your end goal is only multiplying your church. Yeah. And yeah, you are so deliberate about saying the end goal is quality of life for people, and I'm willing to work with anybody to get there.
And so all this talk about smoothing over these profound differences and then using language to lead the readers of the New York Times and to lead the Muslims to think that we really do have a common vision of love of God when we don't even have a common vision of God is not honest.
I think Muslims in many ways are often like the Corneliuses of Scripture, who have a heart for God. They want to do the right thing.
I am not an anti-gay or anti-gay marriage activist. Never have been, never will be. During the whole Proposition 8 thing, I never once went to a meeting, never once issued a statement, never once even gave an endorsement in the 2 years Prop 8 was going. So I urge you to support Proposition 8 and pass that word on. I'm going to be sending out a note to pastors on what I believe about this, but everybody knows what I believe about it, and they heard me at the Civil Forum when I asked both Obama and McCain on their views.
Don't think you need to worry or
the church needs to fear. We've dealt with this, by the way, as an eldership. We went to the websites, we talked, we didn't just blow this off as elders. I don't want you to worry that John's lost his marbles and he's getting old and hanging out with people that compromise his intelligence or whatever. I don't think that's the case. So pray.
I'm here with Pastor Rick Warren of Saddleback Church. He needs no introduction. We are the Clinton Global Initiative, where he was just on a panel about solving problems in rural poverty. And one of the questions that was asked to you directly, Pastor Rick, was, what can the church do? And your response was to actually expand that and say it's actually about houses of worship. And I'm really struck by how explicit you were as an evangelical pastor about the need for Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims and Christians to all be a part of efforts that are solving poverty. I'd love for you to just talk about why you are so explicit and direct about the need for all these faith communities to be a part of this.
Well, you know, if you remove people of faith, and when I talk about people of faith, I'm talking about all of the faiths that we have in the world, the actual number of secularists is quite small outside of Europe and Manhattan. Most people have some kind of faith. There are about 600 million Buddhists. There are about 800 million Hindus. There are 1 billion Muslims and about 2.3 billion Christians. So if you don't have them in the agenda for dealing with the global issues of poverty, disease, illiteracy, corruption, trafficking, all of these different things, you've removed the largest pool of volunteers. The other thing is, if you go to rural areas, the only social structure in rural areas are houses of worship. either churches, mosques, or whatever. And so not only do we have universal distribution, you can find a house of worship in every village in the world, but we have the most volunteers, because when you talk about community development, you are talking about the mosque, the church, the temple, whatever, because the people are there. And then number three, those houses of worship have the most credibility. People trust that imam. They trust that pastor. They trust that priest, that minister, whoever it is, because he is there caring for the people in their times of needs. He's there offering comfort, offering wisdom, offering support. NGOs kind of come and go. I've been in many countries that when war comes or genocide comes or famine comes, the NGOs pull out. But the churches, the mosque, the temple stay because they are the community.
You know, I'd love for you to talk about whether it was an expansion for you to go from the idea of churches being the only kind of distribution system to this to, again, being so direct about the need for different faith communities. One of the stereotypes of people of faith, and perhaps evangelicals in particular, is that your end goal is only multiplying your church. And you are so deliberate about saying the end goal is quality of life for people, and I'm willing to work with anybody to get there.
I am willing to work with anybody on issues that involve everybody. When you deal with poverty, that's not a religious issue. That's a human issue. When you deal with disease, that's not a religious issue. That's a human issue. When you deal with education, everybody needs to be educated so that they can have the opportunities for growth, for a job, and things like that. And so we don't have to agree on everything to work together on issues that we all care about. I don't know anybody who really would say, oh, I don't care about the poor. And so we have to work together and say, the problem is so big we have to team tackle it. If you watch a Monday night football game, sometimes they'll put 2 or 3 players on one guy who has the ball. They're trying to stop that guy. And on these issues, we have to team tackle. And so we work, well, let me give you an example. In Rwanda, in one area where we're working on a health care issue, where we're saying there were only 2 doctors in this province for over 700,000 people. We said, what if we could train healthcare workers in every house of worship? So right now, through our peace plan, we are training both pastors and imams, and we are training leaders, actually volunteers from both the mosques and the churches that are coming together to say, how can we learn healthcare so we can care for the people in our congregations? The congregational unit, whether it's a Muslim congregation, a Jewish congregation, a Christian congregation, or whatever, is a basic unit you're going to find in every community. And that congregational unit is there to be mobilized for these global problems.
Last question, Pastor Rick. Tell me something that you have learned that you admire about, say, Islam, as that's a prevalent faith in Rwanda.
Yeah. Well, I would say, of course, I've been in the Middle East many times. In fact, I recently went to Syria with my next-door neighbor, who is a dear, dear friend of mine. In fact, I'm actually going to be the keynote speaker for a major Muslim convention this next December. Dr. Hathout had invited me to be the speaker for that. And what I love, what I can find in common with Muslims is they talk about God. There's some people who, when you get around them, if you say the word God, they're afraid and they clam up. But you can't talk with a Muslim without talking about God, because it's a part of their life. And so the willingness, I would just say that, I found this true of practically every religion, is that what you read in the paper and the reality, they are 2 totally different things. What you find about people, I find that Christians get smeared in papers, Muslims get smeared in papers, Jews get smeared in papers, and a lot of times you don't even know the real truth until you sit down and you talk with people. And the truth is, we all have the same needs here on earth. We all want our families to be safe. We all want our families to have an education. We all want to make enough money so that there's food on the table. These are common needs, and in humanity, I think God is pleased when we work together.
I think God is pleased when we work together also, and I thank God for you, Pastor Rick, and your unbelievable efforts. This is Ibu Patel from the Interfaith Youth Corps with Rick Warren at the Clinton Global Initiative. Such a blessing to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ibu.